Hello, this is Bread Wild here in Boseman, Montana, KBZN, and sitting in front of us is the latest Zibo, and I say latest with a little smile because tomorrow it could be a different version, but this is 3.32a, the latest full version with the B fixes applied, and we are in X-Plane 11.30 R3, which is the latest as of today for X-Plane. And we're going to be flying down to Las Vegas. So if we go over and take a look at our map just to orient ourselves, here's Las Vegas. We have San Francisco over here. Here's Salt Lake City. And here's Bozeman. Just a little bit north of Yosemite, kind of on the western edge of Montana. But let's take a look at the weather. It is winter, so things have gotten kind of exciting there. So we've got some weather here that we're going to be picking up right after we take off, but it gets a little bit better as we head southwest towards Las Vegas. So why don't we take a look at Flight Aware, which is going to give us an actual flight that has been flown or will be flown, and I'm looking at Allegiant Air, which I'm not familiar with. So on Flight Aware I've just dialed in the origin and destination, and it shows all the possible flights. These flights look like they stop in Salt Lake City. This one is non-stop. So let's just pick this one and take a look at the flight plan down here where it says route. And I'm going to go ahead and decode that, and you can see the airports on either end, and then the SID and star and transitions in between, and then every waypoint along the way. So I'm going to keep this available, and as I punch it in to the FMS in the airplane, I'll make sure that these are appearing as they should. Also, let's take a look at our winds aloft. So we're kind of on the western edge of Montana. If you click on any point along, any reporting point along our route, you can see the winds aloft. And I've got it dialed in at 34, or flight level 340, winds 350 at 110 knots, and temperature minus 55. So we've got a pretty good wind from the west, so we'll be crabbing quite a bit. And just check down here, 240 at 110, so very similar winds aloft along our route. And one last stop before we head over to the airplane. This is fuelplanner.com, and I've dialed in the Zibo model here and our origin and destination, and head over to the load sheet. And the salient information we're interested in here is the takeoff fuel of 17,000 pounds, and then we've got a reserve of 7,200 pounds, and I've converted that here in the Google calculator. So we've got 8,000 kilograms, which is what we'll be using in the Zibo model. I have it set to use kilograms instead of pounds, and then that 7,200 for our reserve is just about 3,200 kilograms, rounded off to 33. So I think that takes care of our pre-flight planning, and let's head over to our airplane. I'm not really wild about how X-Plane has placed me at the gate. I don't think it's going to be very convenient for our passengers. So we're going to have to pretend. I mean, we are pretending this is a flight simulator after all. So over to our iPad, and we want to start up our GPU. Now in the latest versions it just by default is connected, and that threw me at first. And then we want to add our fuel, and that was it's going to be a total then of 11.5. Again, just rounding it off. And we want to put in a center of gravity shift of -21. And this number is a bit of a mystery, but it just seems to work. You want to end up with about 18% here. And you can see we've got some fuel in the center tanks as well as left and right, so we want to make sure we turn those on. So we're ready to begin our startup process. And like all flights, we begin with our battery. Ground power is already been connected, but you click the switch and you should hear all the fans and what have you going. And we do want to turn on some air conditioning here, so turn on our packs. And we can turn on some lights, backlighting here, arm our emergency lights, turn on our fasten seatbelt, and how about some lighting outside to let people know what's going on. And now up to our IRS. So this goes over to heading status, and then we rotate our selector switch here to nav. And you'll see just 1 minute before everything's aligned, because on the iPad I set the preference to have a quick alignment just to speed things up. So now we can go down to our main view here and then drop down to our FMS. How about a little more light here? Main panel and background light. Whoops. And we probably should close the door here. And there's a panel light here that will give us some backlighting on our instruments and switches. And now let's program our FMS. So starting by clicking FMC. Sorry, I said FMS. Apparently we're calling it the FMC. I think I know that by now. And we'll start by initiating our position, and I want to clear this reminder from the scratch board. Go over to next page, click L4, which will give me our coordinates back to the previous page, and plug that in here. And now we can put in our airport. So Kilo Bravo, Zulu, November. And head over to our route. Boseman is in the scratch pad, so I just click it here, and then I just want to put in Kilo Lima Alpha Sierra for Las Vegas. And then we can begin with our performance pages. So just click L1, and you can see that it has put in our gross weight. Our fuel is already in, and our reserves are 3.5. Our cost index is going to be 30. Our cruise altitude, flight level 340. and our winds aloft 250 at 110. And our outside temperature was minus 53 centigrade. Didn't like that. Try that again. Minus 53. Okay, that worked. And then over to our N1, and you begin just by clicking L1, and our outside temperature should be -2. Well, this says +2. There's an indication here as well, +3, close enough. Our takeoff power is 98.8, and we can derate the engines somewhat. So let's put in 40 degrees, and it drops it to 94. Might be a little severe. Let's try 30. 97. I'm more comfortable with that. And we are not going to derate our climb. Let's go over to our takeoff. 5 degrees flaps. Here. Center of gravity is 17.6. Now I'm not sure why it's using that, but we had 18.7. So our trim is 5.52. We'll want to check that in a minute. And these are our takeoff speeds. I want to especially remember 143. This is almost set, so I can use a switch on my joystick to set that to 5.5. And now over to our departure screen. So we have a couple of choices that we need to make here, which runway and which SID are we going to use. I've switched to the high altitude chart and kind of zoomed in here, but let's just take a look at the airport diagram. Winds are out of 250, and probably the closest runway that is safe would be runway 30. So we'll have a little bit of crosswind. And going back to our flight-aware flight plan, we've got a SID of TRX 4 and a transition of Delta Bravo Sierra. TRX 4, transition, DBS, and 30. And we will activate that. And now time for our arrival into Las Vegas. I just checked the winds at Las Vegas, and they are out of 80 at 6. So I thought I would listen to the ATIS at live ATC. So let's have a listen.
Landing runways 26 left and land 9 right. Departing runways 26 right, land 9 right and land 9 left.
So 26 left. Let's take a look at a couple of charts here. First of all, 26 left, ILS. I just want to make a couple of notes, mental notes here, looking at these waypoints, which could all be possible transitions. So we might have to reference back. I don't always remember these. And then if we remember back to our flight-aware flight plan, they were using Site 3, which looks like this. And you can see that we'll be coming from this direction, and I don't know whether we're going to be offered Empire or Gap for our transitions, but you can see how this chart leads us nicely down to 26 left. So let's see what the FMC offers us as options. One more thing we should check before we head back to the airplane. This is our original flight aware route, and you can see a transition here of Empire to a star of Site 3. So let's go ahead and see what waypoints the FMC offers us. So programming our arrival, I'm just flipping through the runways, and here's 26 left, an ILS, and now we want to find Site 3. And then we've got a couple of transitions here, but if you remember, the flight plan Empire was the transition of choice, so we can go ahead and execute that. Now let's go check the legs and see if there are any discontinuities, and we do have one. There are no waypoints after Delta Bravo Sierra down to our transition of Empire. So we need to plug in these three waypoints to complete our plan. We could just skip them all, but I want it to be mimicking this particular flight plan as closely as possible, so we'll do that. Okay, so we have Patio, Pichot, and MLB. Just go back and make sure we don't have any others, so let's consider our FMS programmed, but we can always check our work. Flip over to plan, and then we can step through this. So you can see these waypoints that we just entered, and finally our approach and landing at 26 left. One more thing that I did off camera, as it were, is I selected everything from the SID through the star, copied it to my clipboard, went over to SkyVector, and pasted it in the flight plan section, and it plotted everything very nicely, and you can see all the waypoints that we plugged in. Here's MLF, and then we come down to, not sure where our waypoint was. Oh, here's Empire. And then on into Las Vegas. All right, time to fire up those engines. And we could probably still use a pushback. Not much, but I'll go ahead and call for it anyway. But before I do that, let's just prepare a couple of things. We need to get our APU started. So just clicking through these don't really do anything. It's more for just immersion. So we're still on ground power, but turn on one fuel pump here for our APU. It's not always necessary, depends on the model of the 737. Some of them have a gravity feed. So I'll go ahead and start the APU, and you can see the temperature come up, and once it settles, we'll get a green or a blue light here and go ahead and turn on the generators. But while we're waiting, I can turn on window heat up here at the top and turn on my hydraulic pumps, the electric to my hydraulic pumps. Back through here, trim air. We'll leave these for right now, and we can dial in our altitude, flight level 340. And landing altitude, that is an excellent question. One we should know. I'm going to have to pull up our airport diagram to see that. And flip it around here. So elevation here at these points, 2,700 feet. It just depends on the runway, so it changes. But anyway, let's just stick with 2,000. And this is for oxygen. And if you don't set it right, you'll get a warning. So you can see that we've got a blue light now, and our APU has settled in. So we can go ahead and turn on the power here. Turn on APU bleed, and now we can call better pushback. Let's pre-plan, and let's see here, and then we can rotate it the way we want it.
Alright, Captain, got the directions. Let me know through the menu when you're ready.
And I think we're ready, aren't we? Let's request it.
Great news, Captain. Your tow's coming.
That is great. So we can go ahead now and in preparation turn on our fuel pumps, because we'll have an opportunity now to start our engines. And I don't think there's anything up here, but let's go across our so we want our barrow. Look at the weather there. It
All
is
right. Looks like the doors and hatches are closed and we're ready to connect.
2972. So we can dial that in. And 143 was our V2. And our runway heading is going to be 30. 300,
Welcome
that
aboard,
is.
Captain. Tow's connected. Bypass pins inserted. Go ahead and kill the parking brake when you're ready to go.
Let's kill the parking brake.
Here comes the pushback. Light 'em up.
So we can go ahead and light them up. So off go our packs, and we can begin by flipping our right engine to ground. And I'm watching the N2 temperature here. And when it gets to 25, we can add some power or some fuel. And I'll go over and turn on our taxi on our transponder. TA. And our altitude is 3,400. I don't know if there are any restrictions. Let's check and our SID, and see what we have here. T-Rex. Let's see. No, nothing that's going to keep us.
Just about done here. Go ahead and set your parking brake.
Let's set the brake and start that other engine.
And we're disconnecting the tow. Give me just a moment.
Watching our N2 come up. And 25, add fuel. Go ahead and disconnect that guy. And moving across, we don't really need our course right now, but we do need our flight director on and arm our auto throttle.
And we're disconnected. Signal and pin on the right. Take it easy and have a safe flight.
And moving across this panel, we want our auto brake to rejected takeoff, or RTO. And we can drop a couple of notches of flaps, 5 actually. And now that our engines have settled down, we can turn on our generator. Whoops. And now we can shut down our APU and put our packs back on so that everybody's comfortable in the back. Flip that up to Gen 1. And probes can go on now. APU is coming down. Taxi light on. And we are ready to taxi. I pulled up the map window that's in the default X-plane, and you can see the direction we need to travel. This map is showing our taxiways, which is great. So a pretty straightforward shot. Add a little power. And I'll spare you the taxi and meet you at the end of the runway. Well, that wasn't too bad. A couple things before we take off. Let's turn on our landing lights, leave our taxi on, and we can turn on our strobe. Don't really need our logo light unless somebody's following us at flight level 340. Can't imagine. And we can start our timer and just make sure everything is where it should be, especially our auto throttle. So we have been cleared for takeoff. So a little bit of a crosswind here on takeoff. And toga. Got a switch on my joystick.
80 knots.
Yep, a little bit of a crosswind here.
E1. Rotate. Positive rate.
Positive rate, gear up. And we'll build up a little speed here before retracting flaps.
400.
And we're ready for VNAV, LNAV, and autopilot. And it's going to make that turn
1000.
for us. Still have 2 notches of flaps to go. So gear to the off position, brake to off as we make that first turn, and another notch of flaps, building speed, and that final notch of flaps. Out the passenger window. Lost some frame rates here. See what I can do to get it back. It's our clouds causing the problems. So we're around 18-19 frames per second. I like to be at least 20, but we're going to ride it out. These are the default clouds with X-Plane 11. They're supposedly better. So we're climbing through 10,000, and we're going to pick up a little speed. Number 250 under 10,000 feet, and we can turn off our landing lights. So now just climb to flight level 340. We are headed to the southwest, and we're about ready to turn a bit more westernly. Back to our map. You can see our route here. So we have quite a dogleg here at Tyrix. And that's right here. Beautiful Montana landscape.
Earn miles for today's flight and continue earning miles with our retail and travel partners.
I wish I knew how to turn that off. I'm sure there's a way. It's probably
Our
simple.
Advantage Aviator MasterCard is another great way to earn miles for everyday
But
purchases
anyway.
and enjoy benefits, such as your first check bag free.
Back to the cockpit. And we make our turn to the south. So we are at flight level 180, time to go to standard barrow and complete our climb. So back in a minute. Alrighty, we've just gone through flight level 320, and you can see our top of descent coming up. Notice we've got N1 LNAV VNAV speed, and N1 is still lit as we climb.
1,000 to go.
I probably should have turned this up in range. So 1,000 to go. We should see our power come back in a second. Here's our target. Nose comes down. And throttles come back. N1 is off. And now we've got FMC speed. So we can turn off our seat belts. I know it's on auto, but this gives me something to do. Not much out there, is there? Passenger view. Not a lot to see. Must be a bit windy up here. We did have winds of 110 knots, I believe it was. So there is not much to do. Our next waypoint is a VOR, Delta Bravo Sierra. And looking over at our map, turn the clouds back on. Let's turn them off for right now so we can see what we're doing. So here's our VOR, and then not a lot until we get down to patio. Contrail. They really cleaned that up in 0.30. Alright, well, join me in a bit as we get a little further down the pike. So ahead of us we have the patio intersection, or not intersection, sorry, waypoint. And out in front of us we have the Great Salt Lake. And if we look at our map, we are approaching, this is patio right here. So we are in this vicinity. So we may catch a glimpse of the airport at Salt Lake City, KSLC. The weather looks like we might. So that would be off in this direction. So, all things looking good. Passenger view. It was a bit more turbulent, but it has calmed down a little bit. So we're in the final stages of our cruise, and we are approaching our top of descent. We just passed Empire, our transition to our star. So we need to start thinking about our descent and what needs to happen. First, just to look out the window. It is getting dark or dusky. But we have calm air and still quite a bit of a headwind. You'll notice our ground speed is just 356 compared to our true airspeed 447. But let's take a look at our chart. So here's our approach chart for runway 26 left. And a couple things I want to pay attention to Number one, our target altitude for our initial approach fix, which is Prino. And we have a rather long approach, about 20 miles. I also want to note our frequency for our localizer, 111.5. I have dialed in the ATIS, but I haven't heard anything just yet. But we are right around here, just past Empire. And just checking the weather, our altimeter is 29.95. And again, we're landing on 26 left. So we can dial that in. The plane will begin its descent automatically, but we'll give it an altitude to shoot for. And we're an hour and 30 minutes into our flight. So just 46 miles to Casino. You get it? It took me a second. I like that. We can also tune our radios while we're waiting here. Said 111. Sensitive to date. There we go. And I said 5, right? 11.5. And we want to have that on both radios. And our course is going to be 259. So that's nice to have on here. And we want it on both radios. Alright, and it doesn't hurt to have our heading set as well. In case we need to do the missed approach. So everything is set up for our descent, and now we're just waiting for those throttles to come back. We'll see the needle move, and there we go. So this shows our descent path, and we begin our descent. We get our arch that shows where we will reach our target altitude. We're back to just 28% on the power. Seat belts on. Beautiful late afternoon. About ready to cross Interstate 15, which runs from Southern California all the way to Salt Lake City and beyond. Not sure what airport is below us. Might be St. George. And if we look, we are being asked for some drag, so I'll go ahead and deploy my speed brake, which you can see out the window here. see that it's up. We should go over to the legs page so we can watch our target altitudes. So our first one is 16, or flight, I don't know if it's a flight level anymore, but it's 16,000. And we have 22 miles to reach that. So I'm a little suspicious. Can't imagine actually hitting that. But we'll see. Alright, back in a few minutes. We continue our descent. Our next waypoint is Wynn. Our target altitude is 12,000. We have another decel here. But we are right on our descent path, indicated here and here. So I think we're in good shape. But it's gonna get a little bit more interesting as we approach Las Vegas. So here is our initial approach fix. Preno. Looking out the window, this is Lake Mead. Hoover Dam is down at the end, and Las Vegas is over in this direction. Sun is just about down. Again, this is Lake Mead, a rather large lake. You can see it here. Zoom in a little bit. So this is Lake Mead, and this is our flight path right here. And we'll make a drop and head down this direction shortly. We are approaching 10,000 feet, and we're right on target. Looking good. So our speed is dropping. This has been discussion on the forums. It shows 240, but everyone knows that 250 is allowable below 10,000, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. It's showing not 223, but now our power is coming back up. So I'm not sure if there isn't some sort of an issue there. Lake Mead. And it looks like we have Vegas off in the distance there. And we want to be at 8,000. So there's a second top of descent here, as it were. Should probably take a look at the chart just to see what is going on here. And this would be Site 3. Flip that around. And yes, you see this line above and below. This is a do not exceed above or below. So once we reach that, it's another top of descent, as it were, and then 8,000 for Preno, and again, a do not exceed. We have to hold 8,000 at that point. And we're beginning a slow descent down to 8,000. Back up to 245. But our descent path is right on the money. So Brino is the beginning of our approach plate. It's asking for drag, and we've got our localizer and glide slope bugs live. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to approach. I think we accomplished what we needed to with the drag. So we're flying right underneath the glide slope as we turn towards our localizer. You can see that up here in the FMA. So our glide slope is, well, it looks like we just hit it. So now we need to begin monitoring our speed. I'm going to drop it down a little bit. This airplane can come in a little bit hot. So it looks like our localizer and our glide slope are connected. See if I can turn on that second AP, which I did. So I've got both commands on. And we're 17 miles from the end of the runway. Glide slope, localizer, nailed. And just watching our speed. I might just drop in a notch of flaps. Or 5 degrees. Slow things up. But we have plenty of time. One thing I forgot to do, landing lights at 10,000. Yeah, my bad. I have the reflections turned off, but it's still not off, but it's the lowest level, and they're still coming up. Look great. So the Las Vegas Strip is along this axis. We're landing perpendicular. And we can lower our speed. We'll just take it down to 140. And we can lower our gear now. That'll bring our speed down. Another notch of flaps. Set our brake. Whoops, wrong way. That was for takeoff. 2, 3. And we're right on the money. We've got our PAPI lights are 2 red, 2 white. You can see some of the buildings here on the strip. Here's the famous pyramid. How about a landing light and runway turn-off lights? So I've got land 3. Everything looks good.
500, 400, 300, 200, 100, 50, 40, 30.
And we begin to flare and auto throttle off and reverse. I don't know if I want to try to make that turn. And reverse off. Whoops. And we're just going to stop here. You don't need to see me taxi in and shut the thing down. If you want to watch a true shutdown with auto gates and everything, doors opening, check out my friend Steve Haynes on YouTube. The name of his channel is Duskbound Aviator. Check him out. That's it for right now. Thanks for joining me. Until next time.